September 13, 1848. A single tamping iron, 6 feet of iron, 27 pounds of cold steel, hurtled through the skull of a young railroad foreman, leaving a gash that would forever change our understanding of the human mind. Phineas Gage, a name that would become synonymous with the fragile border between brain tissue and personality, survived what should have been a fatal injury, only to emerge a stranger to everyone who knew him. Born in 1823 in New Hampshire, Gage grew up in a world defined by railroads and ambition. By his mid-20s, he had become a foreman on the ambitious construction of the Rutland and Burlington Railroad in Vermont, a position that demanded precision, leadership, and an iron will. The job required blasting rock to clear a path for the iron tracks, a task that combined raw explosives with the delicate art of tamping, packing the powder into a drilled hole with a long iron rod to ensure a controlled blast. On that fateful September morning, Gage was overseeing the crew's routine use of a black powder charge. The powder was packed, the fuse was lit, and the tamping iron was driven home to compress the charge. The explosion erupted with a deafening roar, and the iron rod, instead of stopping at the intended depth, was propelled forward with the force of a cannonball. It entered Gage's left cheek, shattered the maxilla, tore through the left frontal lobe and burst out of the top of his skull, landing a few feet away. Blood spurted like a fountain. His colleagues screamed and fell back in horror. Gage fell unconscious, his brain exposed to the open air, yet the iron rod remained lodged within his head, a grotesque trophy of the blast. Remarkably, Gage did not die on the spot. Within minutes, a local physician, Dr. Edward H. Williams, arrived and began a frantic attempt to stabilize the patient. The tamping iron was carefully withdrawn, and the wound was cleaned with whiskey and water, standard antiseptic practice of the era. Blood loss was severe, but Gage's pulse remained strong. Over the next few days, he endured a grueling regimen of care. The wound was dressed, his diet was limited to broth, and his temperature was monitored with a mercury thermometer that seemed to rise and fall in tandem with his delirium. When Gage finally regained consciousness, his speech was slurred, his memory fragmented, and his demeanor unsettlingly different. He could recount the details of the accident, but his emotional responses were muted or inappropriate. He laughed at the surgeon's jokes, yet seemed indifferent to the concern of his family. The first signs of the personality shift were subtle. A once meticulous foreman who had earned the trust of his crew now exhibited impulsivity, profanity, and a reckless disregard for social conventions. He would make inappropriate jokes, swear profusely, and seem unable to plan or follow through on tasks that had once come naturally to him. The case quickly attracted the attention of the medical community. In the months that followed, Dr. John Martin Harlow, a young physician at the Connecticut State Hospital for the Insane in Hartford, took over Gage's care. Harlow conducted a series of observations, noting that Gage's motor functions remained largely intact. He could walk, eat, and even lift heavy objects, but his executive functions were compromised. He could no longer maintain a steady job, could not keep a household, and his relationships deteriorated. Harlow documented these changes in a series of letters to his mentor, Dr. Henry Jacob Bigelow, who later published the first detailed account of Gage's condition in the Boston Medical and Surgical Journal in 1869, more than 2 decades after the incident. The autopsy, performed in 1860 after Gage's death at the age of 37, offered the final piece of the puzzle. Dr. Harlow's examination revealed a large cavity where the left frontal lobe had been destroyed, with surrounding scar tissue and a chronic infection that had likely contributed to Gage's declining health. The right hemisphere appeared relatively untouched, explaining why his basic motor abilities remained functional. The brain's frontal region, however, had been devastated, the very area now known to orchestrate decision-making, impulse control, and social behavior. The pathologist's notes, written in a careful, clinical hand, described the damaged tissue as the seat of the faculty of judgment. In the decades that followed, Gage's story became a cornerstone of neuroscience. Early neurologists, grappling with the mystery of how the brain generated personality, cited his case as proof that the mind could be physically divided. The 19th century concept of phrenology, which claimed that bumps on the skull revealed character traits, was challenged by the stark reality that a single blast could shatter those traits. As neuroanatomy matured, researchers such as Paul Broca and later, modern cognitive neuroscientists, used Gage's injury to map the prefrontal cortex's role in executive function. Functional imaging studies have since confirmed that the left dorsolateral prefrontal cortex, precisely the region obliterated in Gage, underpins planning, reasoning, and social conduct. Beyond the laboratory, Gage's legacy ripples through popular culture. He appears in medical textbooks, psychology lectures, and even in the pages of science fiction, symbolizing the thin line between who we are and what our brain permits us to be. His skull, preserved at Harvard Medical School, sits behind glass, a reminder of the fragile barrier between flesh and consciousness. The tamping iron, once a tool of construction, now rests in a museum as a relic of tragedy turned revelation. Subscribe to the Autopsy Files for more stories like this.